Hello everybody, my name's Tim.
And I'm Robin.
Today we want to talk to you about how the Leviathan Spirit can disrupt a marriage.
So within the 24 years that we've been married, about 15 of those years, we struggled a lot. We struggled mostly with our communication. There was a lot of strife in our marriage. We had arguments and disagreements, and it was just kind of an ongoing battle for many years. So it was mostly having to do with how my husband would respond to me. In the beginning, it was, what I wasn't expecting his responses to be, but I would still say, okay, I forgive you, and we would move on. But it would continue, these little disagreements, and that's one of the things. It would start out little, but then it would just gradually get way too complicated. And I would have no problem telling my husband what he did that upset me or hurt me. I would come to him and I would confront him and tell him what it was that hurt my feelings. So how it would usually play out would be I would get upset because of something that he would say to me. And it was more so in the tone of his voice. It was a very negative tone most of the time. It sounded very harsh and cutting to me. And normally I would be in a good mood even. Everything would be pleasant, but then he would respond to me in a negative way. And I would be taken back by that and respond negative to him because I felt that I didn't deserve to be treated that way.
So a lot of the time, yeah, exactly what she said. I would, say something harsh or rude, and then she would get upset. Her feelings would be hurt, and then we would try to work it out, but my apologies were pretty much, I'm sorry, let's move on, which obviously wasn't good enough. So she would ask me, you can do better than that, give me a heartfelt apology. But the problem was I couldn't do that because this spirit, not only is it a pride spirit, but it basically hardens your heart to a point where you don't have any sympathy, you don't have any that love. You can't really give that, reciprocate that back to your spouse. So I wasn't physically able to give a heartfelt apology, and so we'd always end up in this cycle where I would either just lock up and not say anything, or I'd leave, walk away, and then we'd end up having to come back and try to resolve it like a day or two later. So it was just like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, the arguments that we had, I can't tell you how many times we had disagreement after disagreement, and it seemed most of the time we could not get to a resolve. So it was just this cycle, and so because I would get offended at what he'd say to me, he then would get offended at me that I was offended. But I always tried to take him back to the beginning of the situation, and it was, explaining to him, well, this is what you did to me. This is what we're supposed to be trying to, resolve and make better. We had countless arguments, and it just, I thought in the beginning that if I could kind of coach him or lead him how to respond to me, then he would understand and he would get it and everything would be great. And he eventually would catch on. We'd be on each other's level. We would know, we would finish each other's sentences. We would know what we were thinking. I just had these high hopes of just perfect communication between us. But every time I tried to do that, every time I tried to say, okay, well, this is what you did, and this is what I need from you. Can you do this next time? And so from him, a lot of times I would hear, yes, I can do that. I'm sorry, and I'll try. And so there was always that I'll try. And there was, what would happen would be he would try maybe once the next day, or the next time we got in an argument, it would always be one time, and then it would always go back to the same way of responding to me, that negative, harsh, rude tone. And so over time, I would get, instead of asking him to, if he could do certain, respond certain ways, I was, disappointed over I had a lot of disappointment and discouragement, because I felt like I was like a broken record, and I would play on repeat. Every time we had these conversations, I felt like, okay, well, he's going to understand me this time. It's going to be better the next time. But usually it never was. So I think out of my frustration, I would start to be more demanding, and you need to do this, and we've talked about this before. Why do you keep doing this? And I began to adopt a negative mindset, and my expectations were also pretty high. I expected him to respond the way I wanted to, and 99% of the time he did not. And so I would become so frustrated, and usually at the end of these disagreements or arguments, I would be in tears. I would be besides myself, just kind of a hopeless feeling. Like, is this cycle going to ever end?
Yeah. It was pretty much just, me not being able to, for one, give her a good apology or a heartfelt apology. I wasn't able to do that. Two, a lot of times I wouldn't even take the blame or the recognize my faults in the matter, I would just try to come back at her and tell her something that she did against me, instead of me taking responsibility for what I had done in it. So yeah, it just ended up being this vicious cycle that we really couldn't get out of until we actually got deliverance. That was kind of like the breaking point. It kind of set us on the right path to be able to communicate and show love to each other.
Yes, it was, so when we had these repeated arguments, it caused a lot of just anguish and strife in the home, and there was not very much peace in the home. There was not very much joy in the home. It was just, trying to survive in the marriage and hoping that it doesn't end up like the last time. But during this time, I had also was in prayer with the Lord. I never stopped crying out to Him for Him to help us. I never stopped praying for Him to rescue our marriage, resolve the issues, and there were plenty of times though where I cried out and I said, I can't do this. I cannot do this anymore. Because I was thinking a lot of times, is this how it's going to be forever? Is this, we've been doing this for 10, 15 years. I don't want the rest of our marriage to be like this. So it was a struggle. When we our conversations, that was another thing. We couldn't even discuss something for longer than 5 minutes. And then soon after that, we'd be going at it. He would get turned off by something I said, or it would be the tone of my voice. And that's another thing too, is if I raised my tone of my voice just slightly, he would almost take it as I was yelling at him.
Yeah, that was another symptom of the Leviathan Spirit, is although I didn't have any compassion or really love in my heart, it's like at the same time, if someone did something towards me, I would get offended very quickly. So yeah, a lot of times she would just be speaking to me and then maybe her voice would raise just slightly, but definitely not yelling. And then I would take that as an attack, and then I would come back, with something harsh, and not loving. So that's just kind of how it was.
The arguments that we would have, in the later stages, I was becoming more just impatient with him and disrespectful and more fault-finding towards him, because I was not seeing any improvements or changes in him in the relationship. So I had these kind of like these triggers, and then instead of being more understanding and accepting, I was more negative and angry when it came to, our problems. So other times where I would, explain what I needed from him in the relationship, until I was just like blue in the face sometimes, because I thought, well, the more I tell him what I need and explain to it in more detail, he's going to get it. He'll know it because I'm going to ingrain it into him. But even then, that would not help the situation. And there were times where I'd do that. I'd be explaining to him how I felt, these in-depth conversations, and then sometimes he would just shut off. And he would close himself off like altogether. And he would sit there and he wouldn't even talk. He would just shut down. And at that point, I could not really get through to him at all because I felt like he was in a different world, different place, or trying to escape, our problem. So.
Yeah, I remember doing that. The fact that I couldn't give a heartfelt apology pretty much, took away any chance of us resolving our conflicts. So I would just, shut down. I wouldn't talk. I'd just sit there and wait until, she would finish what she was saying, and then a lot of times that'd be it. I'd go my separate way, she would go hers, and then we wouldn't talk for another day or two, and then she would usually come to me and say, hey, we need to resolve this, when I had already pretty much moved on. And so it'd just be kind of trying to rehash it and, figure out where we left off and try to get some kind of resolve. That's pretty much all we did.
Yeah. So I can remember there was a time that we had an argument, and I was so frustrated at how he responded to me. And I had gone outside, and there was just a lot of, I had some health, issues going on at that time. We were, financially struggling, and there was just a lot of stress. And I remember going outside, and I was sitting in my car, and I was talking to the Lord, and I said, God, how can I love someone that I hate so much? And this was just after years and years of these issues. And I had looked up, and there's a great fruit tree in our yard, and there was a hummingbird. And the hummingbird flew straight up into the air, and it went so far up, and I just followed it to where it stopped. And then it just kind of like hovered there for a little bit. And it just made me think that, when you're in a situation that is hard, and when you're struggling, whatever it may be, that we should always be looking up to the Lord. We shouldn't be looking down. We should be looking up. And so automatically, I just thought of Jesus when I was looking up at this cute little hummingbird, and he just kept hovering there for the longest time. And then the verse came to my mind, we love because he first loved us. And then I was just like, oh yeah, that's right. Lord, you loved us first, so we can love. You died on that cross for us. You forgave us of our sins, so we can forgive others. And it was just like this, kind of like an opening, insightful point. And so I kind of worked it out with God and talked to Him and kept praying to Him. And then later on, you know, things were better from maybe, you know, the beginning, middle parts of our struggle, but there was still issues that were still happening, still repeating themselves. It would be more kind of sporadic, but sporadic enough to where, you know, we were kind of over it. And but it was when, you know, God, we started coming to church and drawing closer to Him, and he became more obedient in his walk with the Lord and was delivered, amazingly delivered from all those things: pride, stubbornness, self-seeking, all part of that Leviathan spirit, and changed him dramatically. He's just not the same person that I married. He's just not. We're more on the same level. We can have these in-depth, long conversations.
Yeah, that was really the breakthrough, was when I got delivered, and then shortly after that she got delivered of the issues that she was dealing with. And once that stuff was out of the way, we're able to come together now and just have a much closer relationship and be able to work things out in a loving manner that we were never able to do before. Yeah. I mean, we went through years of counseling, may have helped a little, but ultimately the problems were still there under the surface. So if any of you guys are out there dealing with similar issues, I highly recommend you seek deliverance. That's really the only thing that's going to help. You know, get in your word. You got to be obedient. You got to walk with Christ. If you're not willing to do that, these things are just going to linger, and you're going to have to repeat the cycles over and over like we did. So that's what I would say to you guys. Just trying to save you guys from going down the road that we went down, which was a very long, hard, painful one.
Yeah. And I would if you're at a point and you don't know what to do, I would encourage you to seek counseling. There's nothing wrong with someone that's going to give you more insight and more direction, and but finding someone that is God-centered counselor, that is a Christian counselor, that can incorporate what the Bible instructs us to do on how to resolve marital issues. Just an encouraging Bible verse that I'd like to put out there is to stay joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer.
Amen. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. Hope you guys were able to get something out of this.